In a small mountain town surrounded by snowy peaks, a group of friends planned a weekend retreat to disconnect from their busy lives. The group, led by 18-year-old Malik Johnson, had chosen a secluded cabin near a frozen lake as their getaway. Malik, a charismatic teen with a knack for storytelling, was the son of Alex Johnson, the revered sheriff of Clearwater County. The boys spent the first evening laughing and roasting marshmallows around a fire pit. The snowy landscape reflected the warm glow of the flames, creating an idyllic scene. They shared jokes and played games, their voices carrying across the silent forest. None of them suspected the calm night was about to spiral into chaos. As their laughter echoed through the trees, a patrol car slowly pulled onto a narrow trail near the cabin. Officer Roy Peterson, a rigid man with a reputation for overstepping his bounds, killed the engine. Accompanied by his partner, Officer Simon Lewis, Peterson stepped out, his boots crunching against the frost-covered ground. The officers approached the group without warning, their flashlight beams cutting through the darkness. Peterson's stern voice broke the cheerful mood. "What are you boys doing out here?" he demanded, his eyes narrowing on Malik. Malik and his friends, startled by the abrupt intrusion, stammered an explanation about their camping trip. Peterson, unimpressed, gestured for them to step away from the fire. "We need to check for contraband," he announced brusquely, already reaching for Malik's backpack. The teens exchanged confused glances but complied. As Peterson rummaged through Malik's belongings, he suddenly pulled out a small plastic bag containing what looked like pills. Malik's jaw dropped. "That's not mine," he protested, his voice steady despite the accusation. Peterson's smirk was cold and deliberate. "Sure it's not," he said mockingly. His partner, Lewis, shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. The other boys began to speak up, but Peterson cut them off. "Quiet," he barked, "unless you all want to spend the night in a holding cell." Peterson's expression softened into a twisted grin. "I'll make you a deal," he said, turning his attention back to Malik. "You like dares? Here's one for you. Walk barefoot across that frozen lake." He gestured toward the glassy expanse shimmering under the moonlight. Malik froze. "You can't be serious," he replied, his breath visible in the freezing air. "Oh, I'm very serious," Peterson said, his grin widening. "Or we can take this little baggie down to the station." The boys tried to reason with him, but Peterson remained unmoved. Malik glanced at his friends, who looked as helpless as he felt. After a tense silence, Malik sighed and began removing his boots and socks, his hands shaking from the cold and the pressure of the moment. The icy ground bit into his bare feet as he stepped toward the lake. Each step across the frozen surface was agony, the cold seeping into his bones. His friends shouted for him to stop, but Malik pressed forward, determined not to give Peterson the satisfaction of seeing him break. The ice creaked ominously beneath him. Peterson, standing on the shore, watched with a smug expression. "Keep going," he taunted. Suddenly, a loud crack split the air. Malik froze, fear flashing across his face. Before he could react, the ice beneath him gave way, plunging him into the frigid water. His friends screamed as he disappeared beneath the surface. Lewis rushed forward, his face pale with panic. "We have to get him out," he yelled. Peterson hesitated, but eventually moved to help. Together, they pulled Malik from the icy water. Shivering violently, Malik collapsed onto the shore, his lips blue and his breath coming in shallow gasps. His friends surrounded him, wrapping him in their coats. Peterson, unfazed, chuckled darkly. "Well, guess you learned a lesson, huh?" The officers left shortly after, their patrol car disappearing into the darkness. The boys carried Malik back to the cabin, their concern for his worsening condition growing with each step. After bundling him in blankets and lighting the fireplace, they decided to take him home. When they arrived at the Johnson household, Sheriff Alex Johnson opened the door. His face darkened as he saw his son, pale and trembling, supported by his friends. Alex quickly ushered them inside, his tone sharp and protective. "What happened?" Malik recounted the night's events, his words halting and interrupted by his chattering teeth. As Alex listened, his expression shifted from disbelief to fury. By the time Malik finished, Alex was gripping the edge of the table, his knuckles white. "Stay here," Alex said, his voice low and cold. "This isn't over." The air in the Johnson household was heavy with tension as Sheriff Alex Johnson slipped on his coat and grabbed his badge. His face was a storm of controlled anger, the fury in his eyes betraying the calm demeanor he usually maintained. Malik, bundled in blankets on the couch, watched his father leave with a mixture of relief and worry. His friends stayed close by, their earlier camaraderie replaced by an unspoken vow of solidarity. The drive to the station was short, but for Alex, it felt like an eternity. Memories of the community he had sworn to protect flashed through his mind. Faces of people who trusted him to uphold justice, to make Clearwater County a place where everyone felt safe, regardless of who they were. And now, that trust had been tarnished by the very officers under his command. When Alex entered the station, the night shift staff froze. His presence carried an authority that silenced the usual banter and chatter. He strode directly to the duty desk, where Peterson and Lewis sat, their faces lit by the glow of their computer screens. Peterson looked up, his casual smirk faltering when he met Alex's piercing gaze. "Peterson, Lewis, my office." "Now," Alex commanded, his voice like a crack of thunder. The officers exchanged nervous glances before standing. Peterson attempted to maintain his usual bravado, but Lewis looked visibly uneasy. They followed Alex down the hallway to his office, their footsteps echoing ominously in the quiet station. Once inside, Alex closed the door with deliberate force. He turned to face the two officers, his eyes locking onto Peterson. "Explain to me," Alex began, his voice low and measured, "why my son came home soaking wet, freezing cold, and telling me a story about being forced onto a frozen lake by an officer under my command." Peterson's smirk returned, though it was weaker this time. "Sheriff, it was just a little fun. Nothing serious." The kid needed to be taught a lesson about respect. Alex's jaw tightened, his fists clenching at his sides. "Taught a lesson? By planting evidence and endangering his life? Is that what you call upholding the law?" Lewis shifted uncomfortably. "Sheriff, Quiet," Alex snapped, silencing Lewis. He took a step closer to Peterson, his towering figure casting a shadow over the officer. "Let me make this clear. I have zero tolerance for abuse of power, and what you did tonight wasn't just unethical. It was criminal." Peterson's bravado crumbled. "Look, Sheriff, You'll get your chance to speak." "To Internal Affairs," Alex interrupted. He picked up the phone on his desk and made a call. Within minutes, 2 investigators from the county's oversight committee arrived, their notebooks in hand and expressions grim. As Peterson and Lewis were escorted out of the office, Alex's thoughts returned to Malik. His son could have died tonight, not just because of the freezing water, but because of the blatant misuse of authority by someone he trusted to protect others. The betrayal cut deep, but Alex knew he couldn't let his emotions cloud his judgment. Justice wasn't about revenge. It was about accountability. The following morning, Alex held a press conference. The town square was filled with reporters and community members, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Alex stood at the podium, his expression solemn but resolute. "Last night, my son and his friends were subjected to a gross abuse of power by 2 officers of this department," he began. The crowd murmured in shock. "This behavior is unacceptable, and I want to assure the people of Clearwater County that swift action is being taken. Officer Roy Peterson and Officer Simon Lewis have been placed on administrative leave, pending a full investigation." He paused, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "No one, regardless of their position or authority, is above the law. This department is committed to serving and protecting every member of our community with fairness and integrity." The press conference concluded with a standing ovation from the community. Alex returned home that evening, exhausted but determined. Malik, now recovering with the help of his friends, looked up as his father entered. "Thanks, Dad," Malik said softly, his voice hoarse but sincere. Alex placed a hand on his son's shoulder, his expression softening. "I'll always fight for what's right, Malik. And I'll always fight for you."